Well, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar and say good afternoon now that it's noon. Uh, Welcome to today's Learn at Lunch webinar. We will hear from Extension Ag Policy State Specialist, Dr. Amy Hagerman, as she discusses USDA drought and disaster assistance programs. If you have questions during today's presentation, please ask them through the chat box. You may open the chat box by clicking the chat button at the bottom of the screen. You may find additional policy information on the OSU Ag Policy and Law page, and more farm management resources are available on the eFarm Management page. I will share these links in the chat window. So Dr. Hagerman, I will turn it over to you now.
All right, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this particular area right now because so many people are being overwhelmed by the number of drought programs that are available right now. What are they? Who do I go to apply for them? How do they compare with each other? So our goal today is not actually to deep dive into any one of these, but really to focus on how these different programs work together. So first, let's just think about this. First, we had the 2021 drought, then we kind of got some relief, but then we had the flash drought in June of 22 that we're now recognizing has extended into a second year of drought. So when we're thinking about those damages of drought to our operations, what are we really talking about here? So kind of starting up with that water droplet, one of the first and most obvious things, of course, is water availability and competition for uses. This is covering a lot of ground in a few words. So we are talking about things like irrigation versus urban or local town use. We're talking about livestock water and then kind of the interactions of even wildlife coming in to use livestock water sources and what that means. So, just some various areas there to think about is groundwater versus surface water and how those limited resources really squeeze us in multiple places. The second thing, moving counterclockwise, is, I'm going to skip cost of production now. We're going to go to recreation and hunting, because that's not what we're going to touch on a lot here today. But this is a real impact in our rural communities, and I think we need to recognize that. A lot of people have hunting leases on their operations, and that's an additional source of income for them. But right now, with wildlife populations moving, or perhaps moving differently because of the drought, this creates an impact in our local community. Say we have a lake in our community. It's impacting the number of people coming into that lake for recreation, for fishing. It's affecting a number of people who are taking out hunting leases because of the effects on the wildlife populations. These are ripple effects that go out through our entire community associated with drought. Then kind of continuing counterclockwise, we have production agriculture. This is where we see the most direct impacts. And this is really where I'm going to focus today on these programs that affect the damages in production agriculture, crops and livestock, all different kinds of crops, all different kinds of livestock. But what those programs are and how they mix is incredibly individual to the operation. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more today, and then also a little bit into that point of risks of production. So this is one that maybe people don't always think about. We tend to think of the direct damages like water availability, like recreation, hunting, and fishing. We don't always think about sort of those subsequent impacts down the line, like the fact that when we have a really droughty fall like this going into the winter, we are at higher risk of wildfires in our various areas of the state, really across the state right now. What can we do to manage those risks? We're thinking about disease. What does this mean for stress in livestock and their susceptibility to illness? So there's a lot of these increased risks that are the result of drought, even though they're not a direct impact of drought. And then what's different about this drought, in my opinion, versus some of our more recent big droughts, is the cost of production right now. So if we're serious about feeding hay or even dry lotting cattle to get them through the winter, as an example, we have to think about that cost of production. So right now, putting nutrients on ground, any kind of investment we want to make in our operation, like cleaning out a pond, drilling a well, these are all things that tend to be a higher cost right now than what we've seen in the past. So it makes this financial management and risk management together really critical. Thinking about the tax implications. So if we're investing in these aspects of our operation, if we're culling cattle earlier than we would have normally because of the drought, that has tax implications. So thinking through that as well. This is a point I'll hit at the end, but I'll say it here as well. Risk management is really a whole farm thought process to walk through. And so we'll hit this again at the end, but engaging who are those people that I trust to work and advise me on how to manage these risks for my operation are really, really crucial. So in the bigger picture of risk management, I think we have to realize that not all damages that are associated with drought actually have a corresponding program to help offset it. I'm going to be focused on the federal programs, but certainly cognizant of the fact that risk management is much more than applying for a program. And there are many ways to manage risk. Some of them don't include these programs. Crop insurance works really well for a lot of people, but there are also people who manage those risks in other ways that they don't participate in crop insurance, as an example. So if you're thinking about whole farm risk management, that's really a separate topic that we could do an entire time period on together. But today we're really going to focus on these drought programs. So our goal today is just to overview existing drought programs that address those 5 different impact areas, really focusing on 3 different impact areas: the livestock, the direct damages to livestock and crops, that water availability, those risks of agriculture, and then the costs of production. That's really what we're going to focus on here today. Okay, so first let's talk about water availability and competition for uses. Here I'm going to focus on 2 programs that are happening right now. The first is that we do have producers, livestock producers, who are hauling water to livestock right now. So they're filling up a tank on their truck and they're hauling it in. Sometimes they can purchase that water actually from municipalities, or they're filling it up at another location and hauling it in. There is a program to help offset some of that cost of hauling water, and it's this emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish. You'll hear it again later in the program, this presentation. This program has different bits and pieces that actually cover quite a bit of ground. This is a federal program. It's administered by the Farm Service Agency, and they're going to ask you how much water you're hauling. So what kind of tanker you're hauling it in, how much are you hauling, how does that compare to normal? And then if you're eligible for this program, then there's a flat rate per gallon that can be associated with that. So I think one of the important things with any of these programs, and it's good to say just right here, is that record keeping is absolutely essential. They want to know how much you have participated in certain activities in the past in a non-drought year and how that compares to this drought year. So keeping those records, whether you're in a drought or not, are really, really important. Then we also have a water projects program, a state program that's being administered by the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. It was actually set up through the Oklahoma Emergency Drought Commission. You may have seen some about this on the news. This is separate from the federal programs. This is an independent state program. And so for water projects, you can put in an application. And the water projects that they're covering on that are water well drilling, putting in pumping facility, setting up pipelines to take water into an area, putting in a pasture tap on a water line, setting up that tank, and creating that heavy use area around the tank is covered under this. Cover crop planting and forage and biomass planting are part of this, not including Bermuda grass. But the one I think most people are putting in applications in so far is pond clean out. When it's dry, it's a really good time to clean out your pond. And so a lot of people have been putting it in on that pond clean out. This comes back to that input cost, right? This is a cost share program where the producer is responsible for a certain portion of that cost. And there's a maximum of $7,500 per county for projects that you can apply for. If we think about a pond clean out, this is a fairly expensive project, particularly for a larger pond. There's actually a maximum that's underneath that $7,500 if you just have a small or medium size pond. So, okay. So if you apply for that program, it's a matter of contacting your district office, your county office for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, letting them know what county you're wanting to do a project in, saying what that project is, and then walking through that process with them to get on that list. There is a waiting list in most counties for these projects. Currently, there is a pot of money that's available to do those projects. I believe it's $8 million right now. And so for anyone who's interested in cleaning out a pond or drilling a well, that's a program to look into. Note, I didn't say dig a pond. So that is a separate program that can be applied for through NRCS or through the Oklahoma Conservation Commission under their regular programs. Okay, let's talk about crops. So most of us are familiar with federal crop insurance. I probably don't need to go into that too much, but for those who may be just gathering information or maybe new to production, this is a federal program. It's administered by the Risk Management Agency, but authorized crop insurance agencies work directly with producers to help them find that right coverage. And all of that transaction happens through your local crop insurance agent. And so whenever I talked about building those people that you trust to work with, to consult with as you're developing your risk management plan, your local crop insurance agent, finding a crop insurance agent that you can work closely with is one of those important relationships to have. Federal crop insurance is available for many crops in most Oklahoma counties. For those crops that are not eligible for federal crop insurance, we have the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, NAP. Yes, I know some of these acronyms do not match up with the name of the program. It just adds to joy and confusion. So this is a federal program. It's administered for the Farm Service Agency. This is for non-insurable crops for losses over 50% of the expected production, and they'll do coverage up to 65%. It includes forages. This is something that some people may not realize about NAP, but there is a service fee and a premium involved. So again, you have to look at those risks, what you want to cover, and whether you want to participate in that for either the federal crop insurance or the NAP. Livestock. So for forages, there's actually a lot of options. So first, I want to focus on looking back at damages already done and looking forward at damages that could be done associated with drought. So first, let's look back. The livestock forage program is looking at reimbursing producers for damage already done to grazing. Now, a lot of producers will turn around and spend that money on hay or feed, but it isn't necessary that you spend the money that way. This is a program that is open. All 77 counties are eligible for LFP for at least one forage type for 2022. And you have until the end of January in 2023 to put in an application for that. It's a pretty simple application, just a one-page application. If you're already set up with the Farm Service Agency, you're just reporting your head of cattle on a critical date. Again, record keeping is pretty important for that. And then they consider that application, and there's a standard payment rate associated with that. But there's also insurance products that allow you to protect against drought going forward. If we look at the drought projections for this winter, there's an expectation that we may be pretty dry even going into the spring. And then we go back into a normal pattern, but not necessarily a wet pattern going into the spring months. That's the expectation right now. So thinking about like an annual forage or a pasture rangeland and forage product that protect against a lack of precipitation. These are two insurance products that are used for different kinds of forage. So they're both available in Oklahoma. They're easy to confuse with each other because they both protect against a lack of rainfall, but they're used for different kinds of crops. So annual forage, we're thinking about grains used for grazing versus PRF, we're thinking perennial pasture, rangeland, and then forage acres. So you can think about the kind of land you have, what you're wanting to protect against, and whether you would want to participate in these insurance programs. Insurance programs do tend to have a premium associated with them. So whereas LFP is free to apply for, if you purchase insurance, that generally does come with a premium. So we thought about, okay, here's the damage to our crop looking back. Here's how we can protect against damage going forward that helps us pay maybe for some additional feed cost in those two time periods. But then we also know that hauling in that hay and feed is really expensive right now. Fuel costs, limitations in the number of trucks available. This is all leading to higher costs of transportation. So again, I told you you'd hear this acronym again, ELAP, Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish, also has a transportation cost share. So it reimburses you for a portion of your excess transportation cost up to a certain amount. So beyond 25 miles, you say how many more miles you had to go to get hay this year versus last year, how many loads of hay you had this year versus last year. And that all goes into a formula, again, with a standard payment rate. It's not about how much you paid to haul that hay. It's about that standard payment rate. Do we have a question? Anything like that? Okay, just checking in. So again, this is a farm service agency program. So you set up an appointment with FSA, you bring in your receipts that show how far you hauled for this year, and you can put that application in. So just kind of review what we have so far. We have insurance products looking forward. We have disaster programs looking back, and we have these sort of cost share programs that help with current costs that we're incurring today, if that's an easy way to think about that. The other thing I'll say right here is there's an option in Oklahoma to actually stack for small grains grazing, for those of us who have wheat this winter, that you can have a rainfall protection, an annual forage protection for the grazing use of that land, and you can have a grain policy for the wheat harvested. So it's called a dual use policy. And that's just one example of ways that you can stack these programs based on the risks that are being covered, because those two policies cover different risks for the operation. Okay, so now let's talk about price protection for livestock. So we have the Livestock Risk Protection Program, and that's the one I'm going to focus on here more so than the Livestock Gross Margin Program, which is more typically used for like fed cattle. But the LRP is an insurance product. You can set it up so that you're covering the period of time, the window of time in which you expect to sell cattle, and you're setting that price floor that you hope to receive at that point, right? Because that's what insurance is for. And then you hope that you can sell for a higher price than that at your local market. But it is a way to set that price floor so that if you are investing in those expensive feeding costs to get cattle through the winter, you know you have some price protection going forward into the next year. So let's just kind of pause right there and again talk about how we can stack these things. Let's say I do have some wheat ground, for example. It's possible to have an annual forage for my wheat grazing, my grain policy, my normal grain policy, but then it's also possible to have the risk protection for the cattle that are grazing. And so there are ways to stack these programs to cover multiple risks for the program. Okay, so let's talk about some of these excess risks that can occur: fire, disease, additional loss on the operation. Now, some of this is already covered under the programs we've already talked about, for example, crop insurance. But then if you lose cattle due to one of these eligible disaster events, or any kind of livestock associated with one of these eligible disaster events, the livestock indemnity program will help offset some of the market value, the loss for the market value of those animals. This is set rates. They're set at the beginning of the year. So you're just showing that it's an excess loss, that it was an eligible event, that they were commercial livestock. So these are animals that help you make a living. And then they will help offset some of that market loss that you incurred because that disaster event happened and you had livestock that died or were injured associated with that event. The other thing I'll talk about here, and this is a lesser known program, is the Emergency Conservation Program. This covers damages to fences and structures, for example, due to fire, not covered by property insurance. I've also seen this used in extreme ice storms where falling tree branches create damages to fence lines. Some of those. This is also something that's been used by some of our tree nut producers in the state, our pecan producers in the state, in addition to the tree assistance program. So this is not an exhaustive list of the programs that are available, just trying to kind of emphasize how you can stack the programs. So what can we do today to engage in risk management? This is incredibly individual to your operation. I've just thrown out all this information, all these different programs. You're like, well, it's still a little overwhelming because it's a lot of programs that are available right now. I think some good first steps to go through is just to start by identifying the risks of greatest concern for your operation. If you're in one of those parts of the state where wildfire risk is a little higher, maybe you want to think seriously about what you can do on your operation to reduce wildfire risk. It's not just these reactive programs, but you can also be proactive about doing things like setting machinery on a gravel pad instead of in any kind of tall grass, keeping your grass trimmed down low around your house and trimming up trees around your house. So there are activities you can just stand on your operation and look around and think about what risks concern you and what you want to mitigate in those risks. Is it price risk? Is it production risk? Is it both? That gives you priority. All of these programs require time from you to learn about them, to talk to people about them, to put in the applications. So know what your priorities are as you go down through that list. Develop trusted relationships with what I call a main five, who can advise you on how to set up your program. This is perhaps a lender, an accountant, a lawyer, your crop insurance agent, maybe your USDA office or your OSU extension office. Who are those people that you trust to advise you on how to manage those risks for your operation? Walk through scenarios with your family and your business partners. If something happens, where are we going to meet? What are we going to do? Divvy up the tasks. Who's going to be responsible for making phone calls and taking pictures while someone else is, maybe talking to the insurance agent? Plug in some numbers into the available USDA calculators. See if this would be worth your time to invest in applying for the programs. Understand the deadlines, the documentation, the reporting requirements up front. Every one of these programs has a different deadline associated with them. They have different documentation requirements. Sometimes it's just self-reporting that you personally do that's just based on your memory or your records. Some of them require you to provide records. So for example, your invoices for hauling hay. So know what those reporting requirements and documentation requirements are up front. And that's a simple phone call to just say, hey, I'm interested in applying for this ELAP program for hay transportation costs. Can you tell me what the requirements are for the documentation and the reporting? Or, you know, I'm thinking about doing a pond cleanout. Can you tell me what this process is and what all I will have to do for that? And then you can decide if it's worth your time or not. Identify ways you can stack programs. And again, this goes right back up to number one. Identify your risks of greatest concern and understand how you want to mitigate them. Because now you have a priority list and you can identify the programs that help address those risks, and you can stack those programs in a way that makes sense for you. And then once you have that plan, land the plane. You know, don't just circle with your plan, but actually land your plane. Go talk to some people and start implementing some of these practices. Maybe that means having some additional record keeping on your operation, but you'll know you have that protection in place. So if this seemed like a lot, specifically for our livestock producers that are in the audience, I worked jointly with Texas AgriLife to put together a livestock risk management handbook. It's live and available online now. If you want to scan this QR code to get a copy of it, it covers all of these different programs that we talked about today, specifically the livestock producers, but some of the ones for crop producers too. So it covers the annual forage program and dual use. It covers the livestock risk protection and compares it to futures and options. How do these two programs compare? What are the pros and cons of them both? So it is pretty long, but it's got a nice table of contents where you can jump to exactly what you're interested in. And you can always email me if you think you'd like a paper copy of that as well. I have a list of people who've already requested one that we're going to put in an order for. So that provides just some more detailed information and some scenarios that you can walk through to see if some of these programs make sense for you. I'm going to pause right there and just ask if there are any questions at this point while maybe some people are working to get that QR code working.
Dr. Hagerman, this is Todd Welch. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. My name's Todd Welch. I'm a lender out here in Northwest Oklahoma at Gateway First Bank. And you talked about if somebody had to haul water from a certain place and then dump it in a dirt tank or something, let's say. Okay. So take a scenario like this, because this is a scenario on my own farm, is I've got an irrigation well that's about 500 yards away from a pond. And are you telling me that if I pump that water into a tank and then drive it to 500 yards, they'll pay me?
Let me make sure that there's not a minimum on that. I'm going to put the fact sheet for this in the chat so you can double check that, because sometimes there are minimums on how far you can haul it that they won't pay within that minimum.
Okay,
so
well,
I want to make sure there's not a minimum. But
okay. Well, what my real question was is if I went out and bought 500 feet of poly pipe and hooked it to my irrigation well and then turned it on and pumped it into my dirt tank, is there an assistance program to pay for all that extra electricity I'm using?
For the extra electricity, no, not that I'm aware of. That state program might help you pay for the pipe that would allow you to pipe in to your pond, but not for the additional electricity cost. And that's kind of one of the tricky things on this, right? It'll help you with the capital investment to actually make that change for your operation, but won't necessarily help with that additional cost for you day to day to do that over the winter.
Yeah, because it's not free to run that electricity to pump it in that pond.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So, okay, well, that was my question. Thank you, Dr. Hagerman.
Yep. I'm just put that list in there real quick. Drop. I'm putting the ELAP link in the chat. And I want to say that it's about 6 cents a gallon, but if we have somebody from FSA that's on here, they can correct me on that. Any other questions? Okay, so there is, Brent wanted me to remind you all that there is a survey for these Learn at Lunch presentations. The link is there at the end of the presentation that you can click on. I hope this was useful information in how you can stack these programs. I know it was very light on details on the individual programs, but my contact information is here, and you are certainly welcome to contact me with additional questions that you might have, or looking for fact sheets or information about specific programs. I'm happy to be that starting place.
Hey, Amy, Clay Bertram here.
Hey, Clay.
Hey, just for the audience, the only date available for the programs left on the crop insurance side is December 1, pasture, rangeland, forage, acreage report, and sales closing. So just FYI, if you're interested in that, get with your local crop insurance agent. If you don't have one, call me.
Thank you, Clay. That's a great reminder that a lot of these deadlines have actually already passed, because some of them are in summer or in late summer or early fall. And so we are past the deadlines for a few of the insurance products. It's a great reminder. Right. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate that. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Brent, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerin. I did share the link to the survey in the chat box, as well as your email address. And then I also wanted to let everyone know that our next scheduled webinar is on December 13th at noon, and JC Hobbs will be discussing taxes during drought and other natural disasters. And so that will be, and I'll send out emails, and there'll be Facebook post about that as well. And as you found out, I did set it where people can unmute themselves to ask questions, or through audio or through the chat. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them now. We appreciate you filling out the webinar surveys. It helps us know how we're doing and gives us important feedback so we can work on improving these webinar series. I still don't see anything, Dr. Hagerman, so I think I'm going to end the webinar now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Hagerman, for presenting today. And we will see everyone on December 13th at noon. So thank you.
I wish we. Thanks, guys. I got it right here. I think.
A complete list of all the programs.